Hi everyone, my name is Anthony Tioli. Thank you for attending my lecture on best practice rehabilitation for patients with knee osteoarthritis. Very good. So we'll start with understanding osteoarthritis. Before we even move on to how to manage it, this is really the foundation that we have to establish. There's also morphology and alignment of the knee. So having a varus static alignment increases the risk of developing knee OA. There's a quadriceps muscle weakness, which is a well-known and established risk factor for developing knee OA, and having sustained a previous knee joint injury, such as an ACL tear or a meniscus tear. So if we have an adolescent athlete, for example, who sustains an ACL or meniscus tear, then they're more likely to develop knee OA 15 to 20 years later. So the first main takeaway of this presentation is that knee osteoarthritis is a complex and multifactorial condition. So this is a really handy treatment pyramid that's provided by GLAD Canada. And basically what you'll notice here in the pyramid is at the bottom, which is the foundation, there's first line treatment. This is what is recommended for all patients with knee osteoarthritis, regardless of severity, regardless of how intense their pain may be. Basically, patient education, exercise, and weight control are recommended for all patients. The next common question that I get afterwards is, okay, so that's great, but what type of exercise or physical activity is best? There are tons of different types of physical activities or exercises to consider. And my answer is basically take your picks. A patient who is in their 60s, well, obviously strength training is important to maintain muscle mass and counteract the effects of sarcopenia or age-related muscle loss. There's also cardiovascular exercise, cycling, aquatic exercise, and it's really, that's great for the cardiovascular health and all their goals, their physical impairments, their tolerance to physical effort. So if they, consider their exercise history, are they someone who's generally sedentary, or are they quite active and they'd like to become more active? So as I mentioned before, the best exercise are those that get done. So if they enjoy what they're doing, they're more likely to stick to it. And if the exercises get done, then there's a greater chance that we'll see potential benefits in terms of reduced pain and improved function. So what we'll see here is we had 4 groups. The first group had lower pain at baseline, but demonstrated an early improvement with respect to exercise. And that's 43%, so a good chunk. The second most common group or most common trajectory was those who had moderate pain at baseline, and also demonstrated an early improvement. So 43 and 32 were at 75%, so 3/4 of this cohort that had lower pain or moderate pain at baseline demonstrated an early improvement with respect to exercise. So that's fantastic. We also know from the study that 10% of the patients did not improve with exercise. So it's difficult to know why, but this is important. We need to investigate a little bit more when we're with our patients. So was it because they just simply didn't do the exercise? Because obviously if we're not doing the exercises, we won't really reap the benefit. That's a pretty obvious fact. And there's also perceptions and beliefs. So do they even believe that exercise is a potential option, or do they think that every time they move, they're wearing down their knee more and more? Because if that's the case, they are most definitely not going to continue with the intervention. So these are all things that need to be addressed to find out why exercise didn't help in those cases. And sometimes the answer is just that it wasn't the intervention for them. It wasn't the one that was going to make the difference. And that's okay as well. It's just to make sure that we exhausted all options before we get to that point. So now we'll discuss walking, which is a really accessible mode of physical activity. And it's what people do day in and day out. So it's a really, we can use that to our advantage. Recommended generally in the literature is to aim for about 6,000 steps per day or more, obviously. And this may or may not be possible initially for patients, and that's fine. What's most important is less than 2,500 steps a day is associated with an increased risk of impaired physical function. So we really do want to get, if we can, at least above that. But again, it's something that we can work towards. If it's overwhelming for the patient at first, it's not something we have to set as a goal immediately. We can work our way up by maybe increase gradually by 500 steps week by week and get them walking a little bit more, make it more of a habit. So why weight loss? So this is a really important one because it's being overweight or obese is a strong modifiable risk factor for knee OA initiation and progression. And those who are obese tend to have a total knee replacement at an earlier age with worse postoperative outcomes. They usually have complications such as infections, persistent pain. So this is really important to consider. The third component of first-line treatment is patient education. And it's really where we can make a real difference, especially during the time that we have with patients in clinic. So it's crucial in the management of knee osteoarthritis. And we're going to go through different things that, different components of patient education that are incredibly important. So first off, there's what is knee OA, so definition, prognosis, etc. So when we're discussing OA with patients, there's certain things we should do and there's certain things that we shouldn't do here. But over time, it tends to dwindle. So this is, again, goes into what I explained before. If we do something that's new or that we haven't done in a while, the knee might be a little reactive to it. It's more sensitive, so it might react more initially. But as we do it, the knee joint can adapt and habituate and become a little less sensitive to the exercises that we're doing. And that's what we clearly see here, is that the exercise-induced pain flare tends to decrease over time. So, and at the end, it's practically non-existent, but obviously the confidence interval, there are some people that still had a slight increase, but that's really reassuring. So we know that those initial flares at the beginning, although not drastic, we can see it's really just 1 point here on a 0 to 10 NRS scale. At the same time, we see that decrease over time, and that's really important. So the conclusion of this study really was that there was a clear decrease in the size of acute exercise-induced pain flares with an increased number of exercise sessions. So like I mentioned, ups and downs or flare-ups are very normal. Patience and perseverance are key. Progress can take time. We saw that with the Lee study, at least 4 to 6 weeks, and lifestyle can definitely influence outcomes as well. What I tend to tell patients is, generally speaking, as long as there's an upward trend and we're in terms of improvement, that's the most important. We look at assistive devices, insoles, and braces. Generally, assistive devices, walking aids, can be considered as an adjunct, but this is really patient specific. And it can be incorporated to diminish pain and improve function in some aspects of quality of life in patients with knee osteoarthritis. We can particularly recommend them for those who have issues with ambulation or those who are have issues with balance or at fall risk. That's really important. It's the last thing we would want. With respect to braces and insoles, there's currently mixed recommendations from best practice guidelines. They're generally not recommended, mainly because of there isn't a consistent. The research isn't consistently demonstrating their efficacy for the management of patients with knee OA. With respect to braces, it can be considered, especially in a patient who may be having issues with joint stability and they find that the brace is providing a bit more support. That's in select cases, it could be potentially relevant. Insoles in general are typically not recommended at all. They don't consistently demonstrate efficacy in patients with knee osteoarthritis. So there could be some potential value in the idea of like a functional TENS unit where patients use it to become more active and it helps them be more active. It's not often used in that kind of a setting, but that could be potentially beneficial. But again, the idea here is just it most definitely should not be used at every session. We should be really focusing on interventions that have established themselves in the literature as effective options, because we only, depending where you are in the world, for us, for example, we often have about 30, maybe 40 minutes with patients. We need to focus that time on the things that we know work. And I think that that's really, really important in that respect. And here's it's just a little kind of joke, but these modalities may be just as effective when left unplugged, because obviously there's a placebo effect associated with electrotherapy modalities. And we've seen that there was a study published, I believe it was on ultrasound, and there was the same effect, whether the machine was plugged in or not, or it was IFC, I can't remember. But just to say, these modalities may be just as effective when left unplugged. So little joke there. Same realm again, non-surgical management, but more on the medical side. So supplements, injections, and surgery. And what's also important to consider is that recent evidence has put into question the safety and clinical effectiveness of intra-articular corticosteroid injections for patients with knee OA. And this is more particularly, so this is a review by Orchard published in 2020, where they did a summary of the evidence of some key high-quality papers. If we look at the pros and cons, so this is what needs to be communicated to the patient so they can make an informed decision. And arthroscopic partial meniscectomy was not superior to sham surgery, which would be the diagnostic arthroscopy, so the diagnostic procedure. They just open and then come out. With regard to clinical outcomes at 1 year, 2 year, or 5 year follow-up. So what we're seeing from this is arthroscopic partial meniscectomy is no better than receiving treatment in physiotherapy. If we look at total knee replacement, it's one of the most common orthopedic surgeries performed, and obviously rates are projected to increase exponentially in the future. I know in Canada, from recent statistics, we do over 70,000 a year. So although there's millions of people living with osteoarthritis, but When we say few of them move on to total knee replacement, that few is really relative. It's quite a large number of people regardless. And that's why it's important to be aware of the current research on the topic as well, especially when we're providing recommendations or referring to an orthopedic surgeon. What proportion of patients report long-term pain after total knee replacement for OA? This is really important topic to discuss with patients prior to having their knee replacement. It's important to just mention that this is a possibility. There's always risks associated with any intervention. We spoke about understanding osteoarthritis. We discussed best practice rehab for managing osteoarthritis, but now we're going to put it all together and I'll present some of the main takeaways of this lecture. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me and I'd be happy to answer them for you. And feel free to follow us on Info Physiotherapy on social media. Regularly post the latest research, generally MSK rehab, but you feel free to follow us. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.